Next item, I think yours too, Mr. Scanlon. Proposed rules for casting or counting provisional ballots cast in incorrect precincts.
Correct, and actually these are the State Board of Elections proposed rules. Public Act 98-115, that was the omnibus bill that was passed by the General Assembly, and it was a 194-page bill. In that bill, there were some provisions that dealt with provisional voting. Specifically, the General Assembly authorized that provisional ballots cast in the incorrect or wrong precinct would be counted, or at least would be counted for certain offices. The bill says that it would be counted for all statewide offices, which would include the state constitutional offices: governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, controller, attorney general, secretary of state. It also required that votes cast for federal office be counted. Although there is an issue, I think, with respect to representative in Congress that I can get into more detail. But below those offices, it did require that if a voter cast a ballot, even though it's in the wrong precinct, but cast a ballot for a correct legislative district or representative district, or for a countywide office, or a citywide office, or township office, then those votes would be counted, even though the ballot was cast in the incorrect precinct. Right now, of course, the law provides that ballots that are not cast in the correct precinct would not be counted. Right. Provisional ballots would not be counted. And that certainly has been the law of the land insofar as the federal courts are concerned. HAVA, when HAVA was enacted, it had language in there that's saying that if it's cast in the correct jurisdiction, then it would be counted. Most of the federal courts that have addressed that have said that when Congress referred to jurisdiction, they were referring to precincts or districts. In other words, the smallest territory in which ballots can be cast as a unit. And so it respected the various state law requirements that ballots would have to be counted in the correct precinct in order to be, or would have to be cast in the correct precinct in order to be counted. And that has been, I believe, the preeminent authority as far as federal law is concerned. So they respect the state law requirements in this regard. Illinois has always had a rule that in order to be counted, a ballot would have to be cast in the correct precinct. So what the General Assembly did here is they have carved out an exception. And the exception is that if it's cast in the incorrect precinct as a provisional ballot, it will be counted, at least it will be counted insofar as those offices that are common to both the correct precinct and the incorrect precinct. Now, that statute also said that those ballots or votes would be counted in accordance with rules adopted by the State Board of Elections. And so the State Board of Elections has adopted and issued a proposed rule which will have to go through the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. So there is a process for reviewing those rules and commenting on those rules. But the proposed rules, as drafted, provide not only would it be counted if it's cast in the incorrect precinct, but it would have to be counted if it's cast in the same county. So, for example, in counties where you have city boards of election commissioners, such as we have here in Cook County and the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, under the state board's proposed rule, if a ballot, a provisional ballot, is cast by a voter who resides in the city of Chicago, but that ballot is cast in suburban Cook County, the board would have to transmit that ballot to the Cook County clerk. And then the Cook County clerk would have to count those votes for the offices that are in common with the correct precinct and the incorrect precinct. Similarly, if a resident of suburban Cook County who may be in the city of Chicago for work, for example, and cannot or does not want to go back to his or her polling place in suburban Cook County, they can cast a provisional ballot in the city of Chicago. And then we would have a duty to transmit that ballot to the county clerk, and they would have to count it. And if anyone, resident in the city who votes in suburban Cook County, likewise, the county clerk would have to take those ballots and transmit it to the board, and the board would have to count votes cast for common offices. So it seems to be this is a rather vast departure from anything we've ever seen before.
Yes.
Counting ballots in an incorrect precinct is one thing, but counting ballots that are cast in an entirely different election jurisdiction is quite another.
Well, and that raises a question in my mind. Normally, if you have a suburban voter come and try to vote, we would tell them, you know, you're not a city voter,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Go to your respective precinct in wherever you live.
Correct.
So does that change?
No. No. The judges of election will still have a duty to inform a voter that they are not in the correct precinct and would have to take steps to inform the voter where his or her correct precinct is located, and would have to tell them that you need to go to that correct precinct. And in past practice, the judges are instructed to tell them if they don't go to the correct precinct and you insist on counting that provisional ballot here in the incorrect precinct, it will not be counted. But under this proposed rule, if that voter says, okay, thank you for informing me that I'm not in the correct precinct, and thank you for telling me where my correct precinct is, but I still wish to insist on counting or casting the provisional ballot in this precinct, it would seem it would be the duty of the judges to give that voter a provisional ballot, and if the voter cast that provisional ballot, to count any votes for any office that are in common with the correct precinct and the incorrect precinct.
So we'd still have to, in the case where a ballot is cast in an incorrect precinct, a provisional ballot, we still have to examine, it's part of our process in examining the provisional ballots, to see whether or not it meets other qualifications, like it's a registered voter.
Correct.
So we have to do that ourselves, irrespective of this. If the only thing that disqualifies that ballot would be the fact that they're in the wrong precinct or ward, then we would then count that ballot if it was a ballot that was, at least as far as offices which go beyond the precinct level for election.
But if I understand the state board's proposed rules correctly, once we get these provisional ballots and provisional ballot affidavits back to our office,
Yes.
once we discover that the ballot was cast by a voter who was registered in another election jurisdiction,
Yeah.
we have to transmit that ballot to that election authority within 2 business days. There doesn't seem to be any other obligation on the part of the board to discern whether, the voter is a registered voter or otherwise is qualified to cast a provisional ballot. All we are required to do is, based on the address of the voter,
Send it on.
send it on.
Well, yes, but for voters within the city of Chicago who are in the wrong precinct or the wrong ward, we would have to do that analysis, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So Jim, is the net result that so long as you're registered someplace in the state of Illinois, you can cast a ballot in any precinct?
Not quite that far. And the reason I say that is because the rules differentiate between counties that have a city board of election commissioners and counties that don't. So, for example, you have to be in the same county in order for the ballot or for the votes to be counted. If someone, for example, resided in Lake County and works in the city of Chicago, they decide, I'm working down here, I'm not going to go back to my precinct up in Lake County, I'm going to cast my provisional ballot here. That vote or those votes would not be counted because that voter is not in the same county, not in Cook County. So there is,
It's a county line.
there's a county line, correct. And if it's cast in the same county, then it would have to be counted. And if it's cast in the same county within a city board of election commissioners, we would have to transmit to the county clerk, and cast in the county, the suburban area of Cook County, county clerk would have to transmit to us. So there is some limitation. Why that limitation? Why that distinction? I don't know. Because there's nothing in the bill, and of course there's no legislative debate on this provision that we know of that would shed any light on it. So we don't know why the state board has drawn that distinction. We do know, we've heard reports that they've had discussions with legislative staff, and perhaps this is coming from legislative staff. So I don't believe the state board has come up with this proposed rule on its own volition. I think there's some other driving force behind it. But nonetheless, there doesn't seem to be any.
Who notifies the provisional voter of what he or she needs to submit, and where does the voter submit that proof of eligibility?
Well, that's a good question, because as I understand the rules right now, that if a voter, let's say a suburban voter in Cook County comes to the city of Chicago, and we get the ballot, we have a duty to transmit it within 2 business days after the election. That would be at the Thursday after the election. So we would have to send the ballot to the Cook County clerk. Now, under another change in the law, a voter would have 7 days, used to be 2 days, to submit any additional documentation in support of his or her provisional ballot. Now they have 7 days. So if they take their time allowed under the new statute and they submit something on the 7th day, it would seem that we'd have an obligation then to forward that information to the Cook County clerk as well, to assist the clerk in making any determination whether or not the provisional ballot is valid and should be counted.
Does this require, Jim, that we notify, and then as in the second question, part B, is encourage voters that are only interested in casting ballots for statewide office or countywide office, just come in wherever you want to go. Just cast a provisional ballot and you're all set.
Well,
I'm being a little facetious, but I mean, still.
well, that is the bottom line. I mean, I don't know that we have any obligation
But we have to tell them what the law is,
to
right?
inform voters, but there may not be an affirmative duty, not that I've read in the rule,
Yeah.
and certainly nothing in the statute. I don't believe there's any affirmative duty on the part of a judge of election to inform a voter, well, sure, you can cast a provisional ballot here in the city of Chicago, even though you live in suburban Cook County, and if you do it, we're going to count all your votes for governor, we're going to count all your votes for U.S. senator or president. So, you know, go ahead.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that once word of this bill gets out,
Right.
and voters understand that, and if they're only interested in their vote for president, or only interested in their vote for governor, or even for state senator, state rep if they happen to live in the same district. But I would expect, you know, at least at the presidential level in governor's race, a lot of voters may only be interested in that race, and they figure, okay, fine, I know under the law Even if I go to the wrong precinct, they've got to count my votes for that, and that's all I care about, so go ahead.
So, but even for those votes, do they, for the statewide offices, does that voter then have to do anything affirmatively once he or she casts his ballot in a different jurisdiction?
No.
Okay, it's
No.
just, they would have to do something affirmative for the other.
They would have to do something affirmative, or let's put it this way. They have the option to do something affirmative if they want to submit something in support of their provisional ballot. For example, if there's a question of whether or not they're truly registered, they can submit a copy of their voter registration card or any other documents. They're not required to do that.
Right.
They're not required to do that. The law does not require any other than completing the provisional voter affidavit. The law does not require a voter to take any other affirmative steps. They have the option, but there's not a duty.
So let's ask the question then. I mean, do we, as an election jurisdiction, not judges of election, do we have an obligation to tell voters about this change in the law? And therefore, the 10-second soundbite will be, if you're only interested in state offices or in countywide offices, you may vote anywhere you want within the county of Cook by casting a provisional ballot. You pick any precinct you want. Just, this is the new law. It's part of our Bill of Rights.
Well, I don't.
I'm just begging the question of discussion, obviously.
And I will defer to Mr. Allen because he has his hand raised on that.
This was part and parcel of our presentation to the city and the county about the importance of the electronic poll books.
Yeah.
Because right now, the judges have the ballot applications for only the 600, 700 people who are registered in that precinct. And when the person comes in, they have no ability, unless they have a smartphone and time, and there's not a line going out the door, they have no ability to direct the voter to the correct precinct. And the electronic poll book would have all 1.5 million voters so that you could say, you belong in the 44th Ward at St. Thomas Church or such and such school, whatever. And that was part and parcel because we were laying out this scene to the budget makers saying, we want to do everything we can to avoid provisional ballots because of this. Not to mention the remaking process where you have to determine, okay, this person was in the correct state senate and state representative district, but the wrong county board district. Therefore, we have to make a new ballot away from the voter with 2 judges, but still they have to make a ballot that only has the correct offices. So we were laying out all these different things. But to answer your question more directly, even if we don't say that that's the law of the land, I can envision a campaign saying,
Absolutely.
you know what, even if you're not in the right precinct, don't worry.
And on one side, we are saying publicly to our voters, vote the top of the ballot down to the bottom of the ballot.
And we're telling them, go to the precinct on election day to make sure your entire ballot counts.
So we're going to get voters who follow our instructions and vote every office on the ballot, and we're going to be remaking these ballots if we have them exercising this new right. We're going to be, first of all, we're going to be remaking many, many more ballots, and we're also going to be not counting votes.
Yeah, we may disenfranchise them on one of those levels, sub-circuit, state senate, state rep.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I'm sure this will be the subject of further discussion, but my initial reaction is we should stay with our historical precedent of encouraging people to vote in the right precinct and vote the entire ballot.
I agree. I agree. Well, we're slowly inching toward.
We're
slowly inching.
Yeah.
We're getting there. So
I think what you said, Commissioner Town, is correct. We should continue to do everything we can to inform and encourage the voter to go to his or her correct precinct, to cast a ballot. And that way, the ballot will be counted in full. And that should be, the primary goal. But, with the change in the law, we now have a legal obligation to count provisional ballots, even if they're cast in the incorrect precinct. That's one new obligation we have. But the other obligation under the state board's proposed rules to start accepting ballots and counting ballots in between election jurisdictions, I don't see anywhere, I don't find any support in the law for that.
Well, that's what I see conflicts between HAVA and the state law and what the State Board of Elections has implemented. And I think that's ripe for litigation at one point, so.
It'd be interesting. Well, it just, again, puts more responsibility on the local election authorities and why we need resources and technology.
And this is going to put a huge impact on this agency. We're going to have to hire judges of election to count these ballots and remake them.
We're going to have
I need to find space to put actual bodies to do these remakes.
And what do we do with early voting? Now, what do we do? We have a set of provisional ballots ready for early voting and will be used.
But we still do get, occasionally we get provisional ballots during the early process. Not a whole lot, but we do get some.
Very few, though. Okay.
Approximately, Lance, how many provisional ballots do we get each election that we reject because they voted in the wrong precinct?
We get about 22,000 and rejected. Oh, Jim's got it right here. I'm sorry, can you?
For November 2012 election, there were 3,735 provisional ballots cast in the wrong precinct.
So the dimension of the administrative responsibility to sort those out.
Correct. And to remake those, which is a very time-consuming
Yeah,
process.
that's the part I have a little concerned about, the remaking of the ballots.
And it gets even trickier if we're dealing with a provisional ballot cast on the touch.
Yeah.
And the county of Cook does all of their provisional votes. I don't know what their numbers are offhand. They do all their provisional ballots on the touchscreen device. So if they have City of Chicago residents who are working out in suburban Cook County and cast their provisional votes in suburban Cook County, we're going to have to find a way to get those votes, those touchscreen votes, and somehow remake them.
I don't know.
We've had some discussions with folks at Dominion about this.
And with the county.
And I think it's going to be a challenge.
Wow. Wow.
Elected representatives from the state board, I'm just wondering if they have any comment that they'd like to make on this new development.
This was nothing that we suggested.
Yeah. Don't go the messenger, right?
But quite frankly, when this was dumped on us in the omnibus bill, we looked at this and as a Marine Corps kid, I think I can only say that this jumped out at me as what I can only say as a cluster embrace for all of us. Mr. Scanlon quite rightly noted that we've kind of crafted in a county limitation for other jurisdictions. It wouldn't really impact you folks, but we did a kind of a city limitation that if I'm in Hinsdale, for example, which strides DuPage and Cook County lines, and I got to the wrong place in Hinsdale, Cook and DuPage are going to have to go back and forth. You'll have to go back and forth with the county that you're located in. But we were trying to head off the idea of somebody in, all of the 110 jurisdictions and only having 2 days to get ballots up here from Carbondale or Galesburg or Coles County. It's a kind of a disaster waiting to happen. I can't imagine what the couple of polling places around Union or Ogilvy Station are going to look like come election day when word gets out of this. I have no idea how you're going to supply these things. Our mutual masters down in Springfield were unmoved by these pleas as we talked about this. We've tried to give you the tightest proposed rule we thought we could get away with from consultation with legislative staffs. You know, I'm not entirely sure how all you're going to get this implemented. It looks like a nightmare to me. I remember my days in DuPage back in the counting room, late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, maybe into Wednesday afternoon with remakes and the like. This is going to be very difficult, challenging for you. It's going to be resource intensive. You're going to have to look at your supplies to polling places located in such a way that you think commuter patterns are such that you'll get an influx of people working in the loop, for example, who thought they were going to be home by 7 o'clock and the meeting ran late or they missed their train and they start looking for that first flag out on the sidewalk and the sign that says polling place. It's a real burden to the election authorities. We've tried to rein it in as much as we think we can get away with. If you wish to bend ears of sympathetic members of the General Assembly to maybe craft some further pare back in the veto session, that might not be a bad idea on your part to steward your resources wisely. But again, yeah, we're the messenger here. We're not the ones who crafted this interesting idea.
Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to have Kim Menzel come with me to my budget hearing next time so we can get this on the
Might not be a bad idea. I mean,
You may not want to do that given the success I've had with everyone else earlier.
but, you know, seriously, to make the connection between resources and legislative obligations, there's a disconnect. You don't understand how much more we have to do. We're asked to do more with less from those that control the purse strings. From those that control the policy, we're asked to do more. So,
Well, isn't it an instance where the one public policy of making it increasingly easier to vote comes into stark conflict with the administrative responsibility of making it happen? And the administrative responsibilities and burdens never prevail, and maybe they shouldn't, because somehow we do make it happen.
but I think that
We work through these things and we accomplish it. Lance, you know, says we're going to have an uglier election, but he always gets it done.
But I think we could
Get
come up with
ugly.
some other ideas on how to make voting easier. But, oh well. Thank you, Jim, for that. We'll rise to the occasion.